The next thing is, how do you move that forward with the tools that are available so that we give people, that very personal experience? And I think, in the field of ticketing, fares, journey planning, information, we're moving forward with that rapidly, but there's still a long way to go.
Hi, I'm Belden Menkus. Welcome to the Purposeful Strategist, the podcast that shifts the conversation about purpose and strategy from what organizations should do to what business leaders are doing and what they've learned along the way. My guest today is Martin Dean, who's the Managing Director of the UK Regional Bus Division at the Go-Ahead Group Limited. This is a £660 million business across England with 8 operating companies and 9,000 employees. Go-Ahead is the largest operator of bus services in London, and outside the capital, the company's regional buses account for about 11% of the UK market. Martin is also chairman of the trade body for the bus and coach sectors, the Confederation of Passenger Transport. Martin, welcome to the Purposeful Strategist podcast.
Thank you, Belden.
Great to have you here. Go-Ahead has a very clear purpose statement, which I'm sure you're familiar with. We're here to connect people and communities today and tomorrow. We do this by caring for our customers, our community, our people, our assets, and the environment. Is this also the purpose of the UK Regional Bus Division, or is it maybe have a slightly different one?
No, that's the purpose that goes out across the business, Belden. So, we've got our London bus division, we've got regional bus, we've got some international operations, and we've got rail as well, but they apply across all of our business.
How did Go-Ahead get to that? Were you part of that? Did that happen a while ago? What was the process? Who got involved?
Yeah, it's really interesting because we had previous values which we modified. And the previous values were things like to be agile, to be open, to be approachable, which are all very, very laudable aims and the sort of things that we should run our businesses by. But I think there was a view that while they were really good values, the problem was it was a little bit difficult to translate those into practical application. So what we've done with the values that you just mentioned, Belden, is that we've translated those into something which is maybe a little bit more understandable and relevant to what we do. So, care for our community is the people that we serve. Care for our assets is our depots and our vehicles, our people. We're very much a people business, so it's what we should be doing. And it's underscored by that word care. So the word care translates really well across a number of areas and a bit more of a practical application of those very, very laudable values that we had before. And
so there was some kind of activity to go from those values to this new purpose. Did that get turned over to a committee? Were a lot of people involved? Did you use outside help? How'd that come about?
It was pretty quick, actually, Belden. There was 1 or 2 people translated our previous values into something, as I say, that was a bit more practical. And then I was asked to comment on those. I liked them. I thought it worked really well. And then we circulated those amongst the senior management team. The rest of the management team felt that it was something they could relate to. So actually, it came pretty quickly. It was internal. It wasn't particularly quantified, but I don't think it needed to be. And I think it actually showed that those values work really well, because there's an argument that says that if you need to take a really long time to get where you need to be, then maybe you're coming up with something which is a little bit too abstract, whereas these seem to fall into the right place straight away. It was actually quite a quick process.
Yeah. This idea of connecting people and communities, it could go well beyond just transport. Does Go-Ahead interpret that idea of connecting pretty narrowly? It's about buses and taking people from A to B and therefore they're connected. Or does it see it more broadly? And if so, how?
I would like to think we see it more broadly. We are transport people, so our primary purpose is to get people to the shops, to get children to school, to get students to educational facilities, to get people to work, people doing personal business, commuting, all that sort of stuff. But I'd like to think that we do invest a lot in our local communities so that they appreciate and in some way all of our colleagues that are working on this, we appreciate that we're something more than just a transport mode. I mean, if you look at the textbooks, it will say that transport's a derived demand. Nobody wants it. It's just that people need it to get from A to B. But I mean, I think there is a lot more to transport than that. You'll be aware, because you've worked in and around transport, you know how important buses are to rural communities, for example. That sense of isolation if we're not around. But that isolation can also apply to urban communities as well. Services that we provide late into the evening. I'm really pleased to say that we're going to be running quite a few services in locations like Brighton and the Isle of Wight on Christmas Day. That shows that although the world sort of stops, in this part of the world on Christmas Day, there's a lot of people that still need to get around. It sounds a bit sort of hackneyed, but I'd like to think that we are embedded in the DNA of people's communities, that people do see us as part of that sort of fabric that makes up their society.
Yeah. How does that translate into sort of the passenger experience, if it does? What makes Go Ahead different from other UK bus companies, and how does that all connect back to the purpose?
I think one of the things that sort of the modern consumer traits that people are looking for is they're looking for authenticity in the businesses that serve them. We have focused on local branding in Go Ahead, and I think that does help to give us that level of authenticity, a bit of connection with the local communities. That's something that probably is important when you see the sort of service that we provide, because I think people see public transport, people see bus services as one of their sort of essential utilities that they require, like gas, water, electricity. And they like to feel that we recognise them as key stakeholders. And I think that local identification does help. I do recognise there are arguments on all sides. A strong national brand is quite important in terms of strengthening that view that you're getting something that's really strong and continuous and is everywhere. And that's a good thing. And it's not just the brand, but we also place a lot of store in terms of making sure that we've got people in our local operating companies that can spend the time talking to stakeholders about what they need, whether it's our individual customers or the transport authorities that we have a lot of partnership agreements with.
Yeah. So you've talked about authenticity, and I see how that's a key part of it. One of the other things we might spend a minute on is innovation. I mean, it seems like it's a pretty important part of Go Ahead's identity, who it is. So how does it foster innovation? How does that link into the purpose?
So I think it's really important. I've been in the industry for 40 years. And
you can't have been, Martin.
It's very kind of you to say that. It's nearly 40 years, not quite 40 years actually. But if you look at where the industry was and where the industry is now, we're not a Californian software business in transportation, and we're not sort of known to be incredibly innovative. But if you look at where we were and where we are now, we have moved a long way, and we're continuing to move forward. So I think in things like provision of information to customers, provision of information, making the life of our drivers more comfortable, we've done a lot of things to move that forward. So digitisation, for example, is really important. And I think the way that we've done that in Go Ahead is that we've specialised. We've made sure that although we've got a number of distinct operating companies, we've made sure that some of those functions, which are very, very specialised in terms of the sort of people that we need to move us forward, we've got those specialists at the centre that can help all of our operating companies, rather than trying to be too individual in terms of getting to move things forward. I think also the thing that is really important is a really good relationship with suppliers. Those things that are so specialist that you need to develop your understanding of what the supplier community can give to you, what you can develop internally and what you need to develop externally as well. And I think we've got some very good relationships with our suppliers. We do have situations where people change between suppliers and working internally with Go Ahead, and I think that helps because it means that they understand better what we need, we understand better what their pressures are. I think just making sure that that because we're not seen necessarily as an industry, and I'm using the sort of the widest sense of the word of the bus industry, as being massively embracing technology, but we do need to do that. The next sort of journey on that is AI and how we can use AI One of the things that I know is predominant in the retail sector is personalisation. How do we make that journey for our individual customers a really good experience where we're showing that we're understanding what every individual needs? And I think if you look back on public transport, we have been an industry which is quite production-led. Understandably, it's all about getting the buses out when they should be, making sure that they run safely and efficiently and don't break down. And sometimes that sort of tends to dominate what we're thinking about. The next thing is, how do you move that forward with the tools that are available so that we give people, that very personal experience? And I think, in the field of ticketing, fares, journey planning, information, we're moving forward with that rapidly, but there's still a long way to go.
I don't know if you can describe it, but what would a more personalized bus journey look like?
So, for example, the fares that we charge people are very coarse rather than granular. And to an extent, we leave it to our customer to decide what they think the best fare should be. But we're very much moving forward now with the technology, which means that people just use their bank card. They don't have to get a specialist transport card anymore. They've got their own bank card, which could be on their phone. They just tap onto the ticket machine and they trust us to work out what their best fare should be. So rather than the mystery of understanding, have they bought the right fare? And sometimes, what the right fare is can change depending upon what journey decisions people make through the week. And the technology is there for us to work all that out for our customers through a back office. There's some locations where that sort of technology is proving to be our best retail channel now. And, we just need to develop that more. And then just the other thing as well is to combine it all with other applications so that things like journey planning can be easier, real-time information, all on the same device, so that it feels that when your bus is going to turn up. It's a very easy experience to understand that the device knows where it is you want to go, so it can help you to plan it, and then we can work out what the best fare can be. When you think of that, you're starting to take down some of those barriers which may prevent people from travelling by public transport, removing some of the mystery of it.
So it feels to me that it sort of takes us into the question of strategy. Describe the bus division strategy as a whole, and maybe, if it varies across some of the operating divisions, how that might work. What's the strategy?
Well, the strategy really is growth. That's the number one thing. Most of the networks that I'm responsible for and work with my colleagues on across England, there's tremendous growth that's available. It's a case of doing all the things to harness that growth and just keep moving on that upward trajectory. So it's a really positive message in that respect. Growth can come organically, and it can also come through acquisition as well. So we're sort of pretty active in doing that. As well as that, we'd like to be seen as being, as part of our strategy, active in our communities, as we've talked about before. Lots of good work with our stakeholders, and that's at a national and a local level. You mentioned my role at CPT, and that's something that we take very seriously in terms of that interaction with central government, but also, at a local level with our transport authorities as well, because, the industry has income through the fare box, but it also has income from various public sector sources. And quite understandably, when you're interacting with central and local government, they need to know that the money that they're investing in our industry is being invested in a way that delivers the outcomes that they want. So they're all really important pillars in terms of the development of our strategy.
Yeah. It sounds like you've sort of got a complex strategic environment. You've got lots of different sources of where the money comes from, lots of different geography and, all of that. Given that, how do you go about developing strategy? What's the process? Who gets involved? Is it you and a small group? Is it that each of the operating divisions come up with their own strategy? How does all that happen?
So the way that we tend to do it is through a budget planning process. That sort of sounds like it's just all about the numbers. But underpinning all of that is our local strategies, which are how do we achieve the growth? What are the markets that are in these local entities that are likely to give us the growth that we need? if we're looking to grow, do we need to increase our assets, as in, the number of buses we run or where we locate those assets, and is there a cost to that? What's the capex requirement? The strategy is developed by the local operating companies within a framework that comes down from Go Ahead Group, and then there's an iterative process which goes through the stages of what does the operating company think is achievable in terms of growth? Does that give group what it needs? Can group invest? There's the right sort of balance between the level of improvement in earnings with the level of capex that's required. That will be an iterative process, and then the budget is settled on. And it's normally a sort of a 3-year planning horizon. Inevitably, there's a lot of focus on year one, and then less focus on years 2 and 3. But of course, years 2 and 3 are important in terms of understanding what the focus and what the priorities are in terms of the short term compared with medium term. That's really how we develop our strategy in terms of the local operating companies and how that sort of feeds down from group level.
You might agree or disagree with this, but that there's this very strong interplay of local and central. You do certain specialized activities that don't make sense for each of the operating companies to do on their own. You do that centrally, but equally you've got to be tuned into the market. It just seems to me that the UK national government has a lot of those challenges of their own to deal with. And I just wonder, is there anything you're seeing in managing that tension in your business that might be useful for the government to kind of think about in terms of how it takes things forward?
Yeah, it's always a difficult one, Belden. I mean, like most things in life, it's all about getting the balance right. So, of course, if you look at the sort of the picture that you're talking about in terms of national and local government, there's a sort of a move towards devolution. But does that mean that the government is saying, you can take responsibility for everything so we can avoid any of the pitfalls of things that are coming forward in the future? Or is it a genuine attempt to put power at a local level where it should be? Local operating companies clearly understand their markets well, but we're part of a group where there's capital, like most companies, that capital is scarce. The group needs to allocate it to where it thinks it should, best be used. And inevitably, as you say, there's a tension. Hopefully, it's a positive tension, because group will say, where's the best place for me to invest my pound? And the job of operating companies is to say, well, look, it's with me because I've got the best growth plan. And conversely, it's important that the group recognise that the messages that they're being given are ones that are coming from people from a very informed point of view, so that group can then make a rational choice. So as I say, it's that it's achieving that balance. That's the most important thing.
Yeah. You're coming up on your 3rd year as managing director of the UK regional bus division. What surprised you? What have you learned?
This is going to sound very cliched, but it's all about the people. It's all about the people. I mean, the bus industry is a people business. Around about sort of 70% of our costs relate to employing people, which obviously gives you the clear clue that we've got a lot of people in business. So it hasn't surprised me, but it's just confirmed what I thought. It's all about people. I mean, people come in many forms, moods, shapes and sizes. They've all got differing requirements, objectives, different issues. People on a different journey in their stages in their life. And, and one of the things that, I need to do, and the managing directors that lead the businesses that are part of our division are doing on a constant basis is, again, that word balance, just trying to make people feel that they're valued, recognising what issues people have got, so that, we can create a motivated workforce, people that feel that they're cared for. If you can do that, then it's one of those things that's difficult to quantify, but it does feel as though if people feel like they're being cared for, then you can get a lot more out of people. So investing in people is everything. It's so important.
Mm-hmm. And looking back, is there anything you'd do differently?
Well, I would have taken the job earlier if I could have done, because it's a great job. And I'm very lucky to be given the opportunity to do it in quite sort of a late stage in my career, actually, because it's a fantastic role. I was in Go-Ahead for a long time before I took this role. And what that meant was that I probably hung on a little bit to some of the things that I did before. And if I had my time again, I would say I've got to hit the ground running and get into this new role immediately. And, it's a big job and you need to get into it straight away. It's just quite an interesting lesson if you get an internal promotion, is just to make sure that you move on to the new one pretty quickly. You've got like a sort of a golden couple of weeks where there's no sort of major expectation of you, where you can sort of go around the business, look around, just sort of take stock and all that sort of stuff. And I still haven't visited every single site that we've got. I probably should have used the first 2, 3, 4 weeks just to say no diary appointments, nothing at all. Just let me go around every single site and just sort of meet people, see things, understand what's going on. So I will get there. I've only got about 2 or 3 left, but it's a startling admission when I've been in the role for 3 years. So I think that's quite important. I think the other thing is just making sure you get the balance right between strategic and tactical issues. I mean, inevitably, in an industry like buses, there's a lot of detail that you can get involved in. On the other hand, there's a lot of strategy type stuff that you can get involved in, high level, which is quite a long way from the coalface. Again, it's that word balance. You need a balance between the two. If you haven't got enough knowledge of the detail, then you start to lose a bit of focus. But on the other hand, you've got a lot of people in your companies that are paid to concentrate on the detail. So, one of the things that I need to do is to interact with other colleagues in head office. And, you need to make sure that you can do both. Just a couple of things there. But overall, it's been a great experience.
Yeah. Anything we haven't touched on you'd like listeners to know?
Well, just the one thing to say, Belden, is that, this is an industry that really is at the crossroads at the moment. So without sort of going all the way through the last sort of 40 years in too much detail, because we'd be here for another sort of hour or so. But this is an industry in the mid-1980s that was privatised and deregulated. It was a very regulated business, obviously, where things like fares were determined by government agencies. The ability to change routes was something that was, was not allowed to be done without, a great level of consultation and regulation. Then it sort of switched right the other way with deregulation. And now we're sort of entering an era where some of your listeners may have heard of franchising, which is basically implementing a London-style regulatory system for buses in other locations which choose to go down that route. So it'll be interesting to see where the industry ends up. I think one of the things about the industry, which has always been very good, is its ability to change with the times. So when it was a regulated industry post-war, it seemed quite comfortable doing that. When it was asked to be quite a sort of a freestyle open access regime, we embraced that, and now we're moving towards, in some cases, a more sort of hybrid structure where there might be some of that freedom in some places, but in other locations where we're working a lot closer with our local transport authorities that will specify what they want in terms of output on the road. A lot of that's going to be embraced in a piece of legislation that's going through Parliament pretty soon, called the Better Buses Bill. So it'll be interesting to see where we end up if we're talking in about a year's time.
Well, perhaps in about a year's time, maybe a little longer, we'll get you back on the podcast and hear how it's all going. That's probably a useful place for us to end. Martin, thanks again for joining. It's really great to hear sort of how you're managing to navigate that balance and also all the changes that have happened and that are coming. Thanks so much.
You're welcome, and thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Purposeful Strategist. In addition to being available on our website, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. If you enjoyed this episode, please do follow us and leave us a 5-star review. It helps others find the podcast. Thanks again, and join us soon for the next episode of the Purposeful Strategist.